You guys are a little further inland, dealing with most of our northern counties. What's the biggest threat during a hurricane or a tropical storm for folks that aren't down along the coast?
Right. Well, most everybody's always familiar with the winds that come along with a tropical, storm and definitely a hurricane. So they tend to historically focus on the wind. While that is a big threat and a concern, really the biggest threat to life and property is the inland flooding and fatalities occurring from that. So really, when you start getting a somewhat slower moving system, the potential to get extreme, significant rainfall really increases. And when you start getting that, and when we're talking about, 10, 20 type inches of rainfall, that's definitely going to cause a significant impact where you're going to start to see, numerous roads flooded, and not just the dirt road or the small country road. It's going to be highways flooded, something that's, traveled heavily. And anytime you see water across the road, as much as you think, hey, I've driven down there 1,000 times, you don't want to drive through any roadway that's got water over it.
A lot of people, they say that tornadoes happen over land and hurricanes happen over water. But, we can obviously get tornadoes during a hurricane. What do you tell folks about the specific tornado threat during a hurricane? When should they worry? More specifically, when should they worry about that tornado threat during a hurricane or a tropical storm?
Right, and tornadoes from a tropical, storm, a weak system, or even a well-developed larger system as a hurricane, there is a tornado threat typically with that system. But what you're looking for with the tornado threat is those outer bands, typically in the north and eastern side. So if you want to say quadrant, kind of the northeast quadrant, that's the typical location you see tornadoes forming in those outer bands. Now, closer to the center, you can see tornadoes, but they typically don't, usually form in that area. You're dealing with higher winds just with the core of the storm or the eye wall. But the tropical cyclone type of tornadoes are in the outer bands. Now, some storms are more efficient than others, and they produce a lot more tornadoes. Some don't produce as many. It's hard to say until the storm's kind of making landfall which ones will end up being that way. Oftentimes these tornadoes are brief, but they're also moving 50, 60, maybe even 70 miles an hour, so they can cover some distance in a short amount of time. Oftentimes they're on the weaker side, F0s, F1s, but the more prolific storms that produce a lot of tornadoes and kind of have the tornado outbreaks, they can produce, strong tornadoes and quite a few of them as well.
Last question is, as we are starting to get into hurricane season, what should people do now to prepare?
Well, essentially, basically have your plan. Always be aware and kind of have that idea of, hey, a tropical system may enter the Gulf. What do I need to start doing? 6 days out, maybe 4 days out. But as things get closer and look to impact your area, have that plan. All right, do I live in a mobile home? Well, if there's going to be high winds, I need to make sure I'm at a more sturdy structure, not stay in that. If you're living in a place that has a lot of trees and you're going to start seeing winds that are going to be well in excess of 50, 70 miles an hour, there's a chance those trees will fall down and fall on some structures. Have a plan, and you have things in your house that are going to last longer than just a couple days, especially if it's a larger storm. Something that will be able to sustain your family for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even longer if it's a extreme type situation.